they have a certain way of presenting themselves. For instance, take the doctor. He has a certain way. For instance, he has good bedside manners, and he behaves as one as he expects a doctor behaves. He may even identify himself with it and believe that he is what he appears to be.
So, what was that about, right? Well, we'll get into that. But first, I'm Logan. Welcome to my YouTube channel where I talk about interesting things and how those things affect us as people. I'm very excited to start on this creative endeavor, and I hope that what I have to say interests you as much as it interests me. And what better topic is there to start with than myself? Okay, joking aside, I'm not really that interesting, but today we will be discussing me, and in turn you may learn something about yourself. So, the tagline, there is no place in heaven for a man who has not suffered. I know that's a lot to take in, so let's break it down. In my eyes, there are two main words that really need context here. Those are heaven and suffered. Neither of them are so simple to define when we get into it. Let's start with heaven, and broadly, it's a long-term goal. And you may have heard the question before, where do you see yourself in 2 years? And heaven should be that place. Not in a religious sense and not in a you're dead sense either. It should be a place, and it helps if it's realistic, where you feel you could be in some period of time. For example, you may want to be a writer or something along those lines. It turns out actually sitting down and figuring this out is an incredible psychological tool because it allows you to act in ways that let you achieve your goal. You might say to yourself, with the goal of becoming a writer in mind, well, I have a nice job and it pays okay, but if I don't start chasing my dream, I'm going to lose my mind. So you may quit your job to take some other course to pursue what you want, and that may be a sacrifice you may have not made if you didn't sit down and set out what's important to you. Now, you may be asking, but what about you? What's your heaven? And well, for me, it would be to have a creative outlet that makes enough money to not be beholden to an employer. And right now, that does seem kind of a pipe dream, but here I am trying to do that, I guess. I think first and foremost, I crave some human connection with people that think similarly to me, which is also why I'm doing this in the first place. If I had to give a long-term goal to this channel, it would be to create a community of like-minded people that likes to discuss similar subjects, but I don't expect this to just happen overnight, if at all, and that's where being realistic comes in once again. As for how long I think this will take, I have no idea. That's kind of the scary thing about YouTube. Sometimes it may never take off. Some people's channels take off pretty quick, and I'm hopeful, but I've digressed. The other part of this is that I've always wanted to find purpose in life. There's always been a part of me that thought life was just inherently pointless, but in like a incredibly personal way. I have always had a profound desire to find some sort of meaning in the last few years that consists of more than me just waking up, going to work, coming home to play video games, and then going to sleep and repeating it all again the next day. So I took up writing at first because I felt as if I had so many ideas that I had left unexplored, but now I'm starting to feel the more solitary nature that just writing brings. What am I going to do about that? Well, I want to share my ideas, and so here I am. This video is kind of the thesis statement to my channel as a whole, in the sense of if you do something creative, it will fuel your soul, or something like that. Now, let's get into what I mean by suffering, but I can't do that without first diving into the real inspiration of this video, which is Carl Jung. This video is not a deep dive into the works of Carl Jung. I am not nearly qualified enough to do that, nor do I have the time, but if I didn't at least introduce him, I think I would be doing a disservice to the information I'm trying to convey. If you didn't know, Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist active in the 1900s who paved the way for the field of psychology with the help of the much more well-known Sigmund Freud. He wrote a lot of psychology books and gave many psychology lectures, but he was also heavily influenced by Friedrich Nietzsche. That influence would lead Jung to come up with and commentate on a lot of existential ideas. One of those ideas was that of suffering. Jung believed in a process called individuation, in which a person would bring every part of themselves that they didn't fully understand or didn't even know about at all, and bring those parts of themselves to the forefront of their mind to become one whole individual. It's a very complicated idea. He wrote a whole book on it. But one of the steps that Jung thought was necessary for this individuation process was suffering. According to him, suffering was an inherent part of the human condition, encompassing various forms of emotional, psychological, and spiritual distress. I'm going to simplify that a bit and divide it into two parts: work and absurdity. By absurdity, I mean that in an existential way. To give you the lowdown, it means that we live in a universe that is naturally harsh and uncaring, but despite all of that, we continue to go on. This is what makes us suffering. The absurdity gives it the negative context, otherwise it would just be work. And let's get into work. I mean, it should be rather self-explanatory. You need to work for what you want. If you do manage to find out what you want, you really need to mean it. To sum it up, figure out what you want and then work really hard for it, because life isn't going to make it easy. Okay, so back to me. I would like to point out that I have suffered a lot in life, but it's important to suffer the right way. What I mean by that is I have had a lot of illnesses and syndromes in my life, from Klein-Levin syndrome to type 1 diabetes. Things haven't always been easy for me. In 2016, I was more sick than I have ever been in my life. I had mono, the flu, strep throat, and pneumonia all at the same time. Ever since then, nothing's quite been the same. I'm very fortunate nowadays to have most of my health issues under control, but, and this is where the sad part of the video comes in, I don't feel like I've accomplished anything except for maybe getting back to normal. I've always felt as if I was a creative person, and for the longest time I haven't even felt like I had an identity, because I haven't been able to express myself in a way that really focuses on something that I love. I've spent all this time ill, and it hasn't allowed me to pursue myself, but now I'm here suffering the right way with a clear goal in mind, and yeah, it feels good. Anyway, on to the third part of the video. Alright, so now that I've armed you with this information, now what? I don't know, man. Go write down some goals or something. The rest is up to you. It's easy to say all of these things, but the hard part is actually doing it. That's why it's called a brutal self-analysis. And self-analysis, by the way, is because before you do all of this, you really have to know yourself, because if you don't, you're just going to be going off on a path that might not even be for you. And at least you learn something along the way, no matter what. But I'm kind of done wasting time. I'm very optimistic about the future despite my current unhappiness, and I'm ready to radically change myself for the better to accomplish all of this. It's hard to look towards the future and talk about optimism because, well, at least for me, I give a lot more brain power to all the negative things about me and about life, which I should probably cut that out a bit. It's an incredibly useful thing to know your strengths, although it seems to me that it's a lot easier to know my weaknesses, but point is, I'm working on it. I'm not really setting out here to teach or tell people how to live their lives. I'm really doing this for myself, as narcissistic as that sounds, but if you do find this helpful, then I'm glad. and maybe consider staying around. Anyway, wherever you are or however you feel, I hope you make it out alright. Till next time.